lot of y'all probably aren't aware of it, but Brad Wanamaker is actually the official logo of the G League. No, I'm messing with you. I'm messing with you. My patrons know. My patrons know, man. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan of Brad Wanamaker. I did probably over 10 Celtic breakdowns, big game breakdowns, like where I did full coverage of the game over last season and into the bubble. And I took my shots at him. That was one of them, right? And it was just very apparent. Like every time I did a game and I covered a game for the Celtics, he seemed to be the weak link in their rotation. I'm not a big fan of him. And look, a lot of other media outlets that cover the Warriors, they're going to sugarcoat everything, all the news, right? I guess some news you just can't, right? But any move they make, they're going to spin it positively. And I'm not always going to do that because I'm going to tell you how I feel. I'm going to keep it real. Therefore, when I do say something that's positive, I really mean it. I'm not just sugarcoating it for you. So I wasn't a fan of this move. And I think part of it was the timing, the context of the move. We're all waiting for the Warriors to sign somebody. Everybody's coming off the board. And he's the first guy, right? If he was the last guy that they signed to fill out that final spot, I don't think I would have felt the type of way. But we're waiting, and then boom, they land Wanamaker. So, it's very uninspiring to say the least, right? But I had to do something. I had to check myself here. And I think it's something that the Warriors organization had to do as well. After the news of Clay, I think we have to recalibrate expectations and wager and plan more towards the future, right? All the talk this offseason had been, how do you balance winning now for the core three and still building towards the future, right? There's a give and a take, and how do you manage that balancing act? And it's right, it's like this. And now I think after Clay goes down, they've got to look a little more towards the future than the present. And that's why they brought in Wanamaker, right? Because he's not a guy you bring in to contend and win a championship this year. That was my knock on him. Look, it's all relative, right? Like I clown him and this and that. He's he's not the greatest of athletes. He's an average Joe, if you will, right? But it's all relative, and meaning like the Celtics had championship aspirations. Therefore, he was the weak link on a very deep and good talented team, right? Like you put him on the Hornets or the Magic, and he's probably not a weak link. It's all relative. But I think that's also in part why the Celtics let him go. The Celtics have championship aspirations. They realized, all right, he's not a 16-game player per se, right? He'll help you in the regular season. He's a solid vet. You can't have him out there playing 20 minutes a game in the playoffs if you want to win it all. The other problem that I had with it is, it kind of felt like he was Brad Stevens' guy. And you see this with coaches often, and it's usually from coaches, right? The guys that are thought of as the upper echelon of coaching, they tend to have a guy that everybody's like, why do you play this dude so much, right? And it's almost an ego thing to me. It's like, look what I can do. I can take a guy that probably shouldn't be getting this opportunity and he can contribute. And, maybe that's just me, but it seems like a lot of the higher end coaches, they like to do that, right? Throughout history. And that's what it felt like he was for Brad Stevens. And so I didn't like it. And when I heard the news last night, I didn't like it, right? But again, I had to readjust. And I was just saying, shout out to the media outlets and the different, Warrior fans that were pointing to the positives, right? And so, I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh man, this just ain't it. But I'm like, wait a minute. What are my expectations for next year, right? Like, I want to make the playoffs, right? I think we can compete. I think we can be a playoff team. Are we going to win the championship? The odds aren't great, right? But to be back relevant, competing and playing in the playoffs, I'm with it, right? So then I'm like, all right, well, let me recalibrate here. If we're probably not winning the championship next year, now let me take a look at Brad Wanamaker. Are we planning towards the future a little more? Is it more about some development as well? We have to balance that side a little more? Okay. So now I understand this move is more about Jordan Poole and Nico Mannion. It's not so much about Wanamaker because he's 31 years old. He's very worldly. He traveled. He played in France, Turkey, Germany, stints in the G League. He's a pro's pro. He's a vet. And at 31 years old with, and I say this in all seriousness. I'm not even trying to take a shot. When you have that little talent and you've made it this far in the NBA, you've got a lot of intangibles, and it's coaching material, frankly, right? It's his mind and his work ethic and being a professional that's got him to where he's at. And so that's why they brought him in, right? To mentor and be a veteran role on this bench and help develop the young guards that we already have in Jordan Poole and Nico Mannion. And, I think some of you may say, well, Steph, who better to learn from Steph, right? Nico said it himself. That's the first thing that came to his mind when he was drafted by the Warriors. Well, I get to learn from Steph. And you're absolutely right. But Steph can only do so much. When you're the superstar, when you're the face of the franchise, that burden can't always fall on you to help these young guys on the bench. And you can't. You can only do so much. He's got more media obligations. He's got more responsibility just carrying the team, and he's on the floor more. Some of this stuff happens on the bench. You got to have a guy that's on the bench that's not always focused on the game and can be chilling and kind of be out of the trees, right? Like what's the saying? Like you're too deep in the forest to see the trees. I probably butchered that, but you know what I'm saying, right? Sometimes Steph's in the battle. He's got to focus on the battle and the matchup he's going up against and the defenses he's seeing, right? He's got to focus on him and be selfish. That's part of being a superstar. Not that Steph's selfish, but it takes these veteran role guys, and that's something that the Warriors are sorely lacking. You lose David West. You lose Sean Livingston. You lose Andre Iguodala. And so it started to make sense when it dawned on me like, okay, this isn't necessarily about winning it all this year or getting a guy that has potential. And look, the other thing is you bring in, and look, as I'm saying this, the Warriors will probably sign him, because that's how it works. But you bring in an Austin Rivers or even like a Dion Waiters or somebody that maybe is like a little more, intriguing or exciting. They're probably not going to help Nico and Poole as much because they're going to be worried about their own career, and they're more talented, so they may just step on those youngsters' toes and take away their opportunity. I think in an ideal world, look, Wanamaker's a vet for these guys, and he maybe starts the season in the rotation and he's showing them the ropes and just modeling how to be a pro, how to be a real NBA player and the work ethic it takes. And ideally, by the end of the year, the young boys, Mannion and Poole, Poole's going to be in the rotation. But if Nico can bump Wanamaker out of the rotation by the end of the year, that's a win. That's an ideal situation, right? And so it just started to fall into place and make sense for me that it's more about the development, and that's where it's okay. Now, as far as his game goes, I know a lot of people were pointing to his free throw percentage last night. He shoots like 92% or something like that. That's cool. What does he shoot? Like 1 or 2 free throws a game? Again, come on. Let's add some context to that. That's cool. But I get it. When people love to use the free throw percentage as an indicator of how good of a shooter a player is. And the more important stat that people showed was he's at the top of the league in catch and shoot 3-pointers, albeit it's not at a high volume, right? But that's good, and that's coveted. He's strong and he's smart. He's going to be in the right spot. And again, these are all things that he can show these young dudes where to be and how he can give that to them. Because again, when you're dealing with a more talented player, you can't give somebody your talent, but you can give someone your knowledge. And I think that's what Wanamaker provides. As far as his physical attributes go, that's where he's lacking. And that's where I was clowning him, right? I'll get in my bag. Maybe Damian Lee will be off the hook for me this year as far as the guy I like to clown on, right? But if you notice, he's got really short legs. Like he has like the legs of somebody 5'8". He's all torso. And so he just doesn't cover a lot of ground. Like he doesn't have a stride. He can't cover a lot of ground. And again, so he's making up for it with his IQ. But, he's strong and he's going to be in the right spots, and that's fine. But overall, like I said, I was disappointed. But after I sat back and kind of reflected and recalibrated my expectations for this season, and that we've got to lean a little bit more into development. Don't get it twisted. We making the playoffs, it's happening, but they've also got to lean into development with some of these younger players And so he's not going to step on any toes, and he's going to be a nice veteran presence in that locker room. Now, who else do we get? As I'm shooting this video, the Warriors re-sign Kent Bazemore. Remember, well, some of you may not remember, but Bazemore started with the Warriors, and, you know, he was kind of infamous for being like, he was one of the first dudes that was getting really wild on the sidelines. You know, like he was just doing a whole lot of extra stuff, and he's just got a lot of energy. And it's, again, another guy that didn't have a straight line path to the success of the NBA. He had to battle to get there. He ended up signing a big deal with Atlanta. Was it Atlanta? He was in Portland, Sacramento. He's kind of moved around a lot, but he started with the Warriors. And more importantly, he's one of Steph Curry's closest friends. He's actually the guy that got Steph Curry on Under Armour. Now, I don't know if we want to thank him or not for that, but, you know, he's the same age as Wanamaker, 31 years old. He's bigger, 6'5". He's a much better athlete. But what I like most about Bazemore, again, is his energy. He's just feisty. He's feisty. And now I just got done talking about Kelly Oubre and that energy. It's similar. Now you've got three guys in Draymond Green, Kelly Oubre, and Kent Bazemore that are just fire to some of the ice on the rest of the roster, right? When they're on the floor, they're going to give you energy. They're going to give you effort. And Bazemore, I believe, is still a plus defender. He's not quite big enough to deal with some of the bigger wings in the league, but there's no back down from him. And then, again, it's character. The Warriors have brought in two veteran guys with character that aren't going to step on the toes in the development of the youth behind them. And again, ideally by the end of the year, hopefully the youth is in front of them. It's not, they're 1-year deals. And, you know, I like Bazemore, man. I like him. I remember listening to him. Did he have a podcast with Vince Carter? I don't know if he was a host of it, but I was listening to a pod with him and Andre Iguodala, and they were saying how it was Andre that said, I've never seen a guy take better care of his body than Kent Bazemore. Like, he was one of the first guys, they said, with the Theragun and, you know, the hype, all that stuff. So he is one of those, he, again, is a pro's pro like Wanamaker, and he specializes in taking care of his body because that's his, you know, that's his meal ticket, right? And so that's great to have in the locker room. We know he's going to mesh. He's familiar with Steph and those guys, and he's just going to bring the energy up. So now you've got these two veteran guards to go along with the youth. I'm not mad at the move. You wonder if they can get, I don't know the cap situation. I'm assuming this was a minimum deal. If they have room for one more big, a veteran big, that's the one thing that we're lacking now. And I assume that's going to have to go under, the Warriors officially filed for that injured player exemption that's going to fall around $9 million. They did that, you know, in the last 24 hours. So that takes a while to clear. And so that's the last piece to fall. It's not probably going to happen during free agency, but you wonder what piece that's going to be and if it's going to be a veteran big, right? Marc Gasol's still out there. Again, you know how I feel about that. I'd rather not. PJ Tucker is the guy I would like, but that's the last final piece. Things are coming together. And again, recalibrate your expectations. A lot of you have only known this dynasty, and so it's championship or bust. But, you know, you've heard Steve Kerr say it time and time again, this isn't the real NBA, right? Like what we went through these final 5 seasons. Some of you that have experienced longer and more tumultuous, I got that word out, Warriors seasons years and years ago. No, like, look, if we're a solid playoff team and we're fun to watch, sign me up. You know, you're not going to compete for a championship every year. So if we can be a good playoff team while developing the youth and they can start to become what we think they can become, that's the best case scenario. And that's the plan by bringing in these high character veteran guys that are going to fit not only culturally, but the system.